Domenico Dean, and Benu Jindal. We are representing the plaintiff this evening, Mrs. Annette Joseph. We have two witnesses who will help to prove our case. The first is Mrs. Annette Joseph, who will show what a cruel decision she is faced with. The second is Dr. Darlene Kennedy, who is an economics professor at Pennsylvania State University. It is our intent to prove that Society Hill Towers Homeowners Association has caused great injustice and flagrant discrimination against persons under the age of 21 years. Annette Joseph has resided in Society Hill Towers since 1960, when it was an apartment complex. In 1977, D&G developers converted the apartments into a condominium complex and an adults-only community. A special exception was provided, however, so that current residents who are under the age of 21 years were permitted to remain. The Joseph family was not originally planning to stay in the condominiums because they could not afford it. But Laura Price and other friends convinced them to stay and told them that the adults-only provision did not apply to them. So the Josephs found a way to scrape up enough money for a down payment. The Joseph family has been living in Society Hill Towers for 26 years. During their 26 years of residence, they have caused no problems for the other tenants of Society Hill Towers. We believe that the evidence will show that the Homeowners Association threatened the Josephs to move out or to throw out their daughter Frances and grandson Edward into the street after their son-in-law was tragically killed by a drunken driver on New Year's Eve. Frances and Edward are merely visiting the Josephs. They are guests of Mr. and Mrs. Joseph. We ask the court to declare that the adults-only provision is violative of the Philadelphia Civil Rights Code as a form of prohibited arbitrary discrimination. The Civil Rights Code prohibits arbitrary discrimination. A three-pronged test has been established to determine whether an action is, in fact, arbitrary discrimination. We ask the court to declare that the adults-only provision is null and void, and to enjoin the Society Hill Towers Homeowners Association from taking any action against the plaintiff's family. We believe that the evidence will show that any action taken against the plaintiff's family is arbitrary discrimination. We believe that the evidence will also show that the Homeowners Association has decided to discriminate against one group of people instead of considering each case. This case is extremely important to our client. Please pay close attention to all of the evidence heard this evening, including that evidence which will be presented to you on behalf of the defendant. At the end of this case, the judge will ask you to render a decision based upon all of the evidence that you have heard. It is our belief and hope that a decision will be made in favor of the plaintiff, Mrs. Annette Joseph. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you.
The defendant is ready to open now, Your Honor. May it please the court. Good evening, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Dylan Titchener. My co-counsels are Scott Bloom. Good evening. And Adrian Smith.
Good evening.
We represent Society Hill Towers Homeowners Association, the defendant in this case. We are here today to defend our right as a licensed business to make and enforce rules when they are deemed beneficial to the functioning of our business, including the right to discriminate in a reasonable and lawful manner. Since the plaintiff has provided the court with most of the background information, I would now like to proceed with a few more pertinent facts. The Homeowners Association is asking Mrs. Joseph and her family to leave Society Hill Towers for a number of unfortunate reasons. In 1977, after obtaining professional legal advice, the Josephs did sign the deed to their condominium, fully aware of the ramifications of the adults-only restriction and its exception. This deed is a purely voluntary and legally binding contract which requires both parties to honor their respective obligations and concessions. We are here today because the Josephs breached their contract with our client when they allowed their daughter Fran to bring their grandson to Society Hill Towers to live. It is not our wish to separate the Josephs' admirably close-knit family, but their needs greatly infringe upon the desires, needs, and rights of the other 479 families in Society Hill Towers who fairly expect their community to be free of minors. In spite of this encroachment upon their lifestyles, however, the residents in the Josephs building did give this family 10 months to figure out a solution to their predicament. Then, the Homeowners Association, going far beyond the bounds of common courtesy, granted the Josephs an additional 3 months, making a total of 13 months after Edward moved to Society Hill Towers in violation of their deed to find a suitable solution. But all these incidents are just supporting facts to the actual crux of this case. Is the exclusion of minors from a residential community arbitrarily discriminating? In our case, no, it is not. We will elicit testimony this evening to show that it is not by proving that this adults-only restriction passes every prong of the farm-back test for arbitrary discrimination. It is the only set of guidelines that measures the legality of exclusionary rules, and it is therefore the sole foundation of this case. We have 2 witnesses this evening who will contribute to our contention that Society Hill Towers is lawfully permitted to bar residence to minors. Our first witness, Mr. Juan Price, the president of the Homeowners Association, will show that 1, Edward is in fact a burden to those people living in the Josephs building. 2, that crime has dramatically decreased since the institution of the adults-only regulation. And 3, that Society Hill Towers has no facilities whatsoever to accommodate young people. Our second witness, Mr. Jonathan Hook, will prove that repair and insurance costs, often associated with crime, have decreased dramatically since the institution of the adults-only regulation, and that this adults-only regulation greatly contributes to the increase in property values at Society Hill Towers. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in view of the facts to be presented and in light of the testimony to be heard, we respectfully request that this court find in favor of the defendant and also grant our counterclaim for possession of Unit 3A, Building 4519 of Society Hill Towers. Thank you.
Will all persons who will be witnesses tonight in this proceeding please rise? Please state your name individually, beginning with the woman on the left.
Dr. Darlene Kennedy, Annette Joseph.
Juan Price, Jonathan Hook.
For the purposes of this action in this proceeding tonight, you can consider yourselves sworn. You're sworn to tell the truth. You may be seated.
Your Honor, I'd like to call Mrs. Annette Joseph to the stand. Would you please state your name and address for the court?
My name is Annette Joseph, and I live at 4519 and 3A at Society Hill Towers.
How long have you resided at Society Hill Towers?
26 years.
What kind of a property was it when you first moved in?
It was an apartment complex,
What are they now?
an adults-only condominium complex.
Therefore, what is the minimum age of a person who can reside at Society Hill Towers?
You have to be 21 years or older to live there.
Mrs. Joseph, who is responsible for converting the apartments into condominiums?
These people called D&G developers.
Mrs. Joseph, did you have to sign any documents to agree to the new rules of the complex?
Yes, we did. We had to sign a deed.
What did your deed state?
It said this and that, but I mean, the gist of it that pertained to us was that there was this exception, and anyone living at Society Hill Towers from January 1st, 1977, that had children were permitted to stay.
Therefore, was your entire family an exception?
As it was explained to me, yes, my family.
Mrs. Joseph, did your deed state any specific penalties for the violation of the new rules of the complex?
No penalties at all.
None whatsoever?
None.
Were you originally planning to buy the condominium?
No, we weren't. We didn't think we had enough money to invest in real estate. And somehow or another, we came up with the down payment.
Then who or what changed your mind?
Well, Ron Price and other friends convinced us that since we lived at Society Hills when it was an apartment, that we might as well stay.
Mrs. Joseph, who is Ron Price?
He's president of the Homeowners Association.
Who was the president at the time of the conversion?
And Dr. Claude Price, his father, he didn't like our kind too much.
Objection, Your Honor, that's an opinion. We ask that it be stricken from the record.
Your Honor, the president at the time of the conversion made some rules and regulations which are now
Testify. Answer the objection that he was rendering a conclusion and was not responsible to the question.
Your Honor, she merely stated that Dr. Claude Price wasn't in favor of their kind.
I
Yes.
sustain the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mrs. Joseph, who else besides yourself lives in your condominium with you?
My husband, he's crippled, and as far as I'm concerned, Fran and my grandson are just visiting.
How old is your grandson?
He's a year and a half.
What are Fran and her son's living arrangements?
Well, they're visiting with us until they can find a place to live.
Would you ever consider Fran living with you?
No, she is a grown woman with a child, and she needs a place of her own.
Mrs. Joseph, when did your daughter and grandson move in with you?
January the 5th, 1985.
Why did they do so?
Her husband, Andy Petsko.
Mrs. Joseph, would you please answer the question? Why did they do so?
I'm sorry. Her husband, Andy Petsko, was killed in a car accident by a drunken driver on New Year's Eve.
Mrs. Joseph, realizing that there was a specific restriction in your deed, why are you allowing your daughter and grandson to visit with you for such a long time?
First of all, I never thought the restriction, it didn't apply to us as far as I was told. And second of all, I didn't think I was breaking any rules if I was an exception.
How long had your daughter and grandson, Edward, been with you before you received any notice from the association of a problem?
10 months.
Did the notice surprise you?
Yes, because I had went around and I asked people, my other tenants, neighbors in Society Hills, in the building, if my grandson, Edward, was any problem to him, and they all said no.
Did you think Edward was a problem?
No, but just to be on the safe side, I wanted to check and make sure.
Mrs. Joseph, what did your notice say?
It said we had 90 days to remedy our situation. We could either kick our daughter and our grandson out in the street or move ourselves, which I don't intend to do.
Have you tried any other places for Frances to live?
We've looked long and hard. There's no place for her to go.
Well, what have been some of the problems that you have been running into?
They're either adults-only condominiums or apartments or whatever the situation is. She doesn't have any money. She's got a child. How are you supposed to get an apartment if you don't have money?
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Now, Mrs. Joseph, before becoming owner of your condominium, you had to sign a deed, didn't you?
Yes.
And this deed included an adults-only provision and an exception that read, "This restriction shall apply purely prospectively and shall not be applied to bar residents by those persons under 21 years of age while residing in Society of Towers as of January 1st, 1977. Isn't that also true?
Yes.
And weren't you advised by the D&G attorneys that the provision didn't apply to Fran?
Excuse me, I didn't hear that.
Weren't you advised by the D&G attorneys that the provision didn't apply to your daughter Frances?
That it what applied to Fran?
That it did not apply to your daughter Frances?
To my family, yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness? This is on managing effects, which has been stipulated by both parties. Directing your attention to page 4, could you read the statement?
Yeah. The Josephs were correctly advised by the D&G attorneys that the restriction did not bar any continuous residence of Frances Joseph, but she is my family.
She was your family at
She
that time,
is
was
my
she not?
family. She's still my family. She's alive and kicking.
Now, your daughter Frances was living there at the time you signed the deed,
Yes.
but your grandson wasn't.
He wasn't around then, no.
Now, Frances and her son moved back on January 5th, 1985.
Yes,
Isn't that
they
true?
did.
So according to the information given to you by the D&G attorneys, your grandson is not supposed to be living with you, is he?
As far as I'm concerned, the exception applies to my
According to the
family.
information given to you.
Well, I just answered your question. Well, as it was... Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Your Honor, may I have a minute?
Pardon?
May I have a minute to... Thank you, Your Honor. We're ready to proceed. Now, Mrs. Joseph, you said that you didn't think it applied to your family at that time.
Say this again.
You didn't think that, you did not think that the provision applied to your family at that time?
The exception of the adults only,
The exception.
it did apply to our family.
Okay, that it did apply. I'm sorry. But your grandson Edward wasn't part of your family at that time, was he?
Well, the way I figured is once you're an exception,
the question,
always an
please.
exception. Yes. No, I don't know. What was the question again? I can't remember.
Your grandson Edward was not part of your family at that time, was
No,
he?
he wasn't.
Thank you. Now, it had been 10 months that your grandson was living with you as of October 15, 1985, the day you received a letter from the Homeowners Association. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And during those 10 months, no one complained, did they?
No.
But they could have at any time, couldn't they?
Yes, they sure could have, but Edward's fine.
Okay. And when it seemed that Fran might be staying longer, you checked with all your neighbors?
Yes.
And everyone said it was okay, right?
Everybody was one person.
Everybody said it was okay because they sort of sympathize with your situation. Isn't
I
it?
don't know why they said it was okay. All I know is they said it was okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
But after 10 months, Lauren Miller, your building representative, did complain, didn't she?
Objection, Your Honor. Lauren Miller is irrelevant. She's not in this court tonight to testify any evidence, therefore her testimony is totally irrelevant to the case.
Well, okay. Your Honor, we're trying to point out the facts that led to the Homeowners Association sending Ms. Joseph the letter.
Well, I'm sure that you have a purpose for this question, and the reason you want to ask it, but counsel has objected on the basis that it's irrelevant. What is your this time.
Well, Lauren Miller is Mrs. Joseph's billing representative, and she was the one to complain. It was her duty to complain.
Your Honor, she's not here tonight to testify.
This is another rejection of the irrelevance.
She doesn't have anything to do with the case, even though she complained.
It's a state rejection on the basis that any testimony would be hearsay.
Now, Mrs. Joseph, in the letter that you received from the Homeowners Association, they gave you an additional 3 months 3 months to work something out. Isn't that true?
What do you mean additional?
After the original 10 months that your grandson had been living with you, they gave you an additional 3 months.
They didn't even know Edward was there the 10 months that he was there.
But the people in your building did.
Yes, but the Homeowners Association didn't know Edward was there.
You had 3 months from the time that someone complained, that anyone complained to you. I'm sorry. You had 3 additional months to when the complaint came to work something out.
They gave us 3 months to work something out, but then we, sued.
That would be all. So you had over 1 year to work something out, isn't that true?
And as you can see, it didn't work. We're still
But you
trying.
did have a year, didn't
We're
you?
still trying, yes.
Now, Mrs. Joseph, have you noticed reasonable decreases in teen-related problems since the conversion?
I don't understand your question.
Rephrase the question.
Has crime related to teenagers in your building, has the situation decreased since the switch to
Objection,
adult
Your Honor.
only?
My witness has no idea of knowing if the crime rate decreased because she's not an expert in that field.
Your Honor, Mrs. Joseph's been living at the building for 26 years. It's within her personal experience.
Your Honor, she's not an expert in the field to know exactly the crime rate. She may experience things going down, but she has no idea to testify if the rate went down or up, since she is not an expert in that field.
We are not asking for specific numbers. We're just asking for what she sees outside of her window.
I think you're assuming, you did ask, in the sense that you asked for the crime rate, and that requires numerical definition. I think you are limited insofar as what she knows, what she has seen at any given time. She is not able to render an opinion as an expert as to the crime rate in a particular period.
Your Honor, we're not asking her to respond on the rate. We're just asking what she sees outside.
Well, that's not the question.
Okay. Well, may I rephrase the question?
I'm going to try to rephrase. I'll open the rules and get ways to rephrase it.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay. Mrs. Joseph, what are your impressions of the teen-related crimes before and after the conversion?
Well, before, they used to have parties, but my daughter was not in it in any way. And after, well, you asked.
Please continue.
And after the children were barred from the condominium, they stole my car.
Did you see them steal your car?
It's not there.
But did you see anyone steal?
Your Honor, if my witness saw someone steal the car, wouldn't she have called the police or stopped them?
Well, you represent her. You let that go. So you can't answer another question. So objection was made to the question. She responded to it.
Now, Mrs. Joseph, one final question. Didn't you say in your affidavit that you would be able to help out your daughter financially if you had the chance?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, no further questions.
May it please the court, I would like to call Dr. Darlene Kennedy to the stand.
and address.
My name is Dr. Darlene Kennedy, and I reside at Penn State University.
Could you please describe your schooling and qualifications?
I was educated at Dickinson College, where I received my degrees in sociology and economics. At Temple University, I received my master's and doctorates in sociology, and at the Wharton School of Business, I received my master's of business administration. I am now a professor of economics at Pennsylvania State University and have been for the past 24 years. In addition to my teaching duties, I do consultant work for nonprofit organizations or governmental groups. And prior to being a teacher, I've held numerous executive positions with the assorted Wall Street business firms. My primary area of interest and expertise is in the housing market concerning contemporary trends
Objection,
in
Your Honor.
housing.
Dr. Kennedy is yet to be established as an expert witness. She can't testify on what she feels her area of expertise is. No, she said she considers herself an expert. She's yet to be
That's
called.
the question that the court will determine as to whether she... I
Thank you, Your Honor.
would request that you limit it to your background and your experience as opposed to any opinions on the area you do.
Would you please tell us the title of the book that you wrote in 1983?
In 1983, the book that I wrote was Age Discrimination in Housing, Subverting Our Traditional Value.
Based on the research for your book, do you draw any conclusions as to whether or not it is more costly to
Objection, Your Honor. She is yet to be established as an expert witness. She's not allowed to draw conclusions.
Right, I understand you well.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Response.
Dr. Kennedy, to review her education, was educated at Dickinson College, was she received?
Are you asking that this witness be accepted into the court as an expert in a particular area?
We were going to review the books and studies that she authored before entering her as an expert, just to clarify that she is indeed an expert.
Counsel has no objection to her talking about the books that she authored, yet she cannot yet draw conclusions from it as she's yet to be established as an expert.
This is saying that
Thank you, Your Honor.
direct counsel to limit it to the knowledge of the book that was written, not the contents of the results that are contained in the record.
Would you please describe the study which you wrote in 1984?
That study was conducted in Philadelphia, specifically about housing discrimination in Philadelphia.
Your Honor, the plaintiffs would like to offer Dr. Kennedy as an expert in the fields of contemporary trends in housing, sales, and rentals, sociology, and economics.
No objection, Your Honor.
She was considered an expert in
Dr. Kennedy, based on the research for your book, do you draw any conclusions as to whether or not it is more costly to live in a complex with children or without children?
Oh, definitely more costly to live in a complex without children.
Your Honor, we ask the bailiff to mark these papers, Exhibit B1. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Dr. Kennedy, I am handing you a document that has been marked Exhibit P1. Do you recognize it?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It is part of the study I conducted in 1985, considering Society Hill's operating expenses from 1975 and 1984.
What does it show?
It shows that Society Hill's operating expenses have increased greatly. Their administration has jumped from $6,000 to $46,000, and overall their expenses have gone up 3 times, from $60,000 in 1975 to 1984 when they were $180,000.
When did these expenses begin to rise?
It began to rise when Society Hill became an adults-only complex.
Your Honor, the plaintiffs would like to offer Exhibit P1 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
What was the overall effect of changing Society Hill Towers from having children to not having children?
When they change to not having children, their costs went up.
In your expert opinion, how difficult would it be for Frances Pesco and her son to find housing overall?
Overall, it would be difficult because the vacancy rate is 1%.
How difficult would it be for Frances and Edward to find housing in the Philadelphia area?
It would be harder in Philadelphia because the vacancy rate in Philadelphia is less than 1%.
Referring to the Josephs, how difficult would it be for the Josephs to find housing?
It would be also difficult for them, considering that in Philadelphia the vacancy rate is less than 1%, and because Mr. Joseph is disabled, it would be even more difficult due to the fact that they'd have to find housing that wasn't too high up, like in an apartment building, or that was easy to get to.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Counsel, your witness.
Good evening. Dr. Kennedy, are you close with the Pesco family?
No.
You claim that you weren't close to the family yet. Wasn't it Andy's mother informed you of Andy's death?
Yes, she just called me to ask for my professional.
Did she inform you?
Yes, she informed me.
And isn't it also true that she requested that you watch over his wife and his son?
In every professional way that I could, like I would for any other woman.
And didn't Francis call you and ask you for your help in this trial?
Yes, simply because of my professional...
Yes or no, please?
What?
Yes or no, please?
What was your question?
Did Francis call you and ask you for your help in this trial?
Yes, for my professional help.
And wasn't it you who referred the Josephs to their present lawyers? Please answer the question, Dr. Kennedy.
Yes, I helped her in any way that I could.
Now, Dr. Kennedy, your master's and your doctorate degrees are in sociology, aren't they?
Yes.
And your book on age discrimination in housing is 3 years old?
Yes.
And the study that you supervise for the U.S. Department of Housing is 6 years old, isn't that true?
Yes.
Now, have you done any follow-up studies for the Department of Housing?
My studies are updated annually.
Have you done any studies?
My studies are updated annually.
No further questions.
Yes, the defense would like to call Mr. Juan Price to the stand, please. Good evening. Could you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Juan Price.
Where do you live, Mr. Price?
At Society Hill Towers, Building 4501, Unit 1A.
How long have you lived at Society Hill Towers?
All of my life.
And Mr. Price, do you presently hold a position with the Society Hill Towers Homeowners Association?
Yes, I do. I'm the president.
And how long have you been the president?
For 6 years.
Mr. Price, do you know the Josephs?
Yes, I know them. I grew up with Fran, and we were friends, and I also know her parents, and we got along pretty well.
And how would you describe your relationship with the Josephs in the past?
We got along well.
Now, directing your attention to October 15th, 1985, what, if anything, happened on that date?
We had a building representative meeting that day, and Lauren Miller, who is the Joseph's building representative, informed us that the Josephs were in violation of their deed because their grandson was living with them.
Why did she complain?
Well, she complained for two reasons. One, their grandson was supposed to stay there for a temporary visit, but after 10 months, it seemed that that visit was going to be permanent. And then, Lauren is an elderly woman and she wants peace and quiet.
Objection, Your Honor. We do agree that Lauren Miller is their building representative, but her physical disabilities or whatever they're trying to bring out is totally irrelevant to this case.
Nowhere was it mentioned anything about a physical disability, and we are trying to establish the reason that a complaint was ever initiated to the Homeowners Association and the grounds for this complaint. Thank you, Your Honor.
Lauren is an elderly woman, and all she wants is peace and quiet, and there are many residents like Lauren. But after 10 long months of the baby's noise, she just couldn't take it anymore.
Mr. Price, what do you do generally when someone is not in compliance with their deed?
Well, naturally, we tell them that they're in violation of their deed, and then we tell them to come up with a solution.
Now, how did you remedy this particular situation?
Well, at the meeting, I suggested that we give the Josephs 90 days to come up with a solution.
Did you vote on this proposal?
Yes, there was a 9-7 vote in favor of the proposal.
9-7. Now, are there 16 building representatives?
No, there are 20, but 16 members were present.
Now, why did you vote with 4 members absent?
Well, the 16 members that were there constituted a quorum, or a majority. And according to Pennsylvania law, any decision regarding enforcement of the rules can be voted upon by a majority of the building representatives.
Mr. Price, does anyone visit you at Society Hill Towers?
Yes, my niece and nephew visit 1 weekend a month.
Now, why do you allow yourself to live with minors when the Josephs can't?
Well, they don't live with me, they just visit. And since the grounds are adult-oriented, I usually take them out somewhere like the zoo or to a park or something, and we have a lot of fun.
Now, let me ask you a few questions about the conversion. Have you had any complaints about unruly juveniles since the conversion to adults only?
Since the conversion, I have not had one complaint.
At this time, I ask that this document be marked as Defense Exhibit Number 1 for identification, the authenticity of which has been stipulated by both parties. Let the record reflect that I am showing D1 for identification to opposing counsel. Can I approach the bench now?
Objection, Your Honor. This piece of document that's trying to be entered as exhibit is written by a lieutenant, and he is not here to testify on behalf of himself as...
There's no question that the first time to establish what it is, what it's doing.
But...
First time to establish that, and then you may not.
Do you recognize D1 for identification, Mr. Price?
Yes, I do. This is a report of reported crime at Society Hill Towers prepared for me by Lieutenant Jones of the Philadelphia Police Department.
Objection, Your Honor. This document has been prepared by Lieutenant Jones of the Philadelphia Police Department. He is not here to testify as to the authenticity of this document. Therefore, we feel that this is hearsay.
First, Your Honor, the authenticity of this document has been stipulated by both parties. Secondly, Mr. Price will not be testifying directly as to the numbers, as he did not witness every incident of crime. He will be testifying to things on that report that he can recall from his own personal knowledge.
They're just why they ask him why this is being recorded.
Well, we're trying to establish that an official police report has validated his thoughts all along. We're trying to establish a decrease in crime, and that you cannot validate it by an official police report and confirm this officially.
Lieutenant Jones is not here to testify that this is an authentic document.
The authenticity of this document has been stipulated by both parties.
Both parties stipulated that it was authentic.
It is an authentic document, but since Lieutenant Jones is not here, it is hearsay.
I'm going to sustain your objection on the basis that it is hearsay to that extent, and the only testimony relevant to the report will be based upon this witness's comments.
That was all we need to get now. Now, Mr. Price, what prompted your request for the preparation of this report?
Well, you know, I am the president of the Homeowners Association, and it is my job to look over what is going on at the Society Hill Towers. And I noticed that since the conversion, there has been a significant decrease in crime, And I asked for this report just to validate or verify what I felt all along, that crime has definitely decreased.
What specific sorts of crime would go on in Society Hill Towers before the conversion?
Well, you know, I grew up there, and before the conversion, the teens who were there were reckless. I mean, they had all-night parties at the swimming pool with drugs and alcohol. They usually tore up the property, and that increased our repairs expenses. There were many counts of crime, like vandalism, arson, theft, assault, and since the conversion, there has not been one complaint of these crimes.
Now, this decrease in crime you speak of, is that reflected in the police report?
Yes, it is.
Okay. At this time, I ask that D1 be moved into evidence.
Do you have any comments?
Yes, Your Honor, we object that it's not be entered into evidence since it was established that it is hearsay.
One final question, Mr. Price. Are there presently any accommodations for the recreation and safety of children at Society Hill Towers?
No. Before the conversion, we had a tot lot, which was for children, but we converted it to a fitness center, which is adult-oriented. We have an additional Olympic-sized swimming pool, which is unenclosed, and the supervision that we have on the grounds would not be adequate if children were living at the Society Hill Towers. And if there were any accident, we would be liable.
Thank you, Mr. Price. The witness counsel.
Mr. Price, it is true that as president of the Homeowners Association, you are aware of the general rules of ownership of the association.
Yes, I am.
Isn't it also true that any action enforced against a specific homeowner is only by majority vote of the building representatives? Isn't that correct, Mr. Joseph? As you testified earlier in your direct...
Yes, we had a majority of the building representatives at the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Just please answer the question that I asked you. Isn't this process in direct accordance with Pennsylvania law?
Yes, I said that.
Thank you. There are 20 building representatives, aren't there?
Yes.
Isn't it true, Mr. Price, that the association ruled against the Josephs by a vote of 9-7, therefore falling 2 votes short of that required majority of 11? Isn't
No,
this true?
a majority
Mr. Price.
have to be there to vote.
Mr. Price,
And we had a majority.
Please, Mr. Price, let me ask the questions. You just agreed
And
with
I'm
me
answering.
that any action is only by majority vote of the building representatives. Now, that doesn't say the building representatives that are present at the meeting. That doesn't, Mr. Price.
The Pennsylvania law says
Thank you, Mr. Price. Isn't it true that in your affidavit you stated the people of this community decided they wanted an adults-only complex?
That's right.
Mr. Price, isn't it true that according to the stipulated facts of this case, in 1977, when B&G developers converted Society Hill Towers apartments to condominiums, they decided to make Society Hill Towers an adults-only complex?
Yes, that's true, but nobody had to stay there if they didn't want
Answer
to.
the question, yes or no. Yes or no, Mr. Price, is this...
Yes.
Thank you. Isn't it also true that 1977, when the conversion took place, current residents under 21 years were allowed to remain?
Yes, that's correct.
But, Mr. Price, isn't it true that those under the age of 21 years now wishing residency in Society Hills are denied?
Yes.
Thank you. Isn't it true that while the adults-only regulation is found in each deed, nowhere are specific penalties found for violation of this regulation?
That's correct.
Thank you. And isn't it true that your own association stipulated the 90 days for the Josephs to remedy their situation at the October 15th meeting?
Excuse me?
That your association stipulated the 90 days that were given to the Josephs to remedy their situation?
Yes, they had time to
Thank
come
you.
up with a
Mr.
solution.
Price, did you or did you not stipulate the 90 days?
Yes.
Isn't it true that your association wants to take away the Josephs home, but are not offering any kind of compensation to them?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Price, as president of the Homeowners Association, let me ask you a question. A young married couple comes to you and wishes to live at Society Hill Towers. This couple does have all the money that is needed to finance the sale. And Mr. Price, and I'm quoting directly from the rules of the association, No person under the age of 21 years shall be permitted to reside in Society Hill Towers. Is this correct?
Objection, Your Honor. She's calling for an improper conclusion, hypothetical situation.
Your Honor, I am basing this line of questioning on Mr. Price's knowledge and experience as president of the Homeowners Association. This is a very probable, typical situation that he would be faced with. This case concerns arbitrary discrimination. Arbitrary, as I understand it, is based on mere opinion and not on a solid foundation of thinking or reasoning. Therefore, this line of questioning is being used to show that this regulation is arbitrary.
Again, Your Honor, this case itself is a test of whether this discrimination is arbitrary or not. We don't need a hypothetical situation that would call for an improper conclusion from Mr. Price. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Price, the two people I just described to you are husband and wife. Now, the husband is 23 years old, but the wife is only 20 years old. Now, as I understand the restriction, as it stands tonight, the couple would be permitted to purchase a condominium, but together they would not be allowed to live in it. Now, isn't that true?
The husband would be able to...
Please answer the question. As a husband and wife, as a family unit.
No.
In fact, the husband would be able to live at Society Hills, but his wife wouldn't, as of this moment.
That's correct.
And this decision is not based on anything like their race, is it?
No.
And it's not based on anything like their religion?
No.
Isn't this decision based solely on age, as defined by the...
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Mr. Price, you also have visitors in your condominium, don't you?
Yes.
And in fact, both your niece and nephew spend one weekend each month with you, don't they?
Yes, they did.
And you'd let these visits last even longer if your brother would allow it, wouldn't you?
Yes.
So visitors are allowed in your condominium.
That's right, but they don't live
Thank
with
you,
me.
Mr. Price. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the defense would like to call Jonathan Hook to the stand. Good evening. Would you state your name and occupation for the record, please?
My name is Jonathan Hook. I'm owner and chief executive officer for Hook Realtors.
Would you tell the court what your educational background is, Mr. Hook?
I went to Penn State University where I received my BA in economics and then went on to receive my master's in business administration from Temple University.
Mr. Hook, have you ever done any studies on management strategies?
Yes, I have. I've done over 24 studies to see whether an adults-only community would be financially viable.
How were these studies done?
I compared the management costs, which were maintenance, insurance, and repairs, before and after a conversion to adults only, and I compared them to the property values.
How many complexes did you look at when you did these studies?
I compared these to approximately 300 condominiums.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, the defense would like to establish that Mr. Hook be recognized as an expert witness in the field of contemporary trends in housing, sales, and rentals.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Hook, what conclusions do you draw from your study of adults-only complexes?
I conclude that management expenses, which are maintenance, insurance, and repairs, invariably decreased upon a conversion to adults only, and the property values also invariably increase upon that conversion.
Thank you. Mr. Hook, when did you first become interested in the adults-only concept?
While I was working on my MBA at Temple University.
Are you employed by D&G contractors?
Yes, I am. I oversee the budget for Society Hill Towers.
Do you receive a salary for this?
I receive a salary from D&G of $7,500 annually.
Have you ever done any studies in this area for D&G?
Yes. Back in 1975, shortly prior to the conversion to adults only, I did a study for D&G to see the projected property values of the average condominium unit in Society Hill Towers.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time I ask that these documents be marked as Defense Exhibits 2 and 3 for identification. record, I'm showing D2 and D3 to opposing counsel. May I approach the bench, Your Honor? May I approach the witnesses D2 and D3? Do you recognize these documents, Mr. Hook?
Yes, I do.
Would you describe them to the court, please?
And what's marked D2 are my pie graphs for Society Hill Towers operating expenses of 1975 and 1984. They reflect the budget of Society Hill Towers. And what's marked D3 is the study I did back in 1975 for D&G of the projected property values of the average condominium unit.
Thank you. Referring to D2 for identification, your operating expenses chart, would you describe what is reflected on this chart?
Since 1975, upon the conversion to adults only, insurance and repairs had decreased. Repairs had decreased because with the lack of juveniles, there had been a tremendous decrease in destruction and property damage. And insurance had decreased since the conversion, which was startling. Over the past few years, insurance and inflation has skyrocketed, and Society Hill Towers has managed to decrease theirs by a significant amount. Since the conversion, administration and recreational staff had increased. Upon conversion of apartments to a condominium, the administration increases because different associations has to be established, like the homeowners association. And it costs more to run a condominium than it does a normal apartment complex. Recreational staff had increased with the implant of a pool, new equipment, exercise equipment, nautilus machines, and they needed people to staff them. Plus, it's just a reflection on what the tenants wanted. Everybody wants more recreational. And maintenance since the conversion, that increased by only 3% in the budget. It stayed approximately the same in my budget.
Thank you. What did you say you did for a living, Mr. Hook?
I oversee the budget for Society Hill Towers, and I own my own realty corporation, Hook Realtors.
Okay. About how many single-bedroom apartments would be available in this area at any given time?
In the area, about 175 single-bedroom vacant apartments without age restriction.
How do you know this?
I am a realtor, and it's part of my job to check the classified ads and keep up on the tabs of the vacancy rate in the area.
175, is this an unusually high number, Mr. Hook?
No, it's about average.
As a real estate agent yourself, what chances did Miss Joseph and her son have of finding an apartment in over a year's time?
I feel their chances would be very good to find an apartment. As I've said, there's approximately 175 single-bedroom vacant apartments without age restriction in the area. And in over a year's time, I feel that the chances would be very good. Besides, their condominium is worth a lot of money. The property value has risen. If they would sell the condominium, they could easily afford to buy a very large home, substantial for them and their grandson and daughter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hook. You talked about percentages. Let's get to actual numbers for a minute. Are you familiar with Dr. Kennedy's operating expenses chart for Society Hill Towers?
Yes, I am. They were taken out of my own records about 2 years ago.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has been marked P1 for identification? Thank you. Does this look like an accurate representation of your records?
Yes, they did. This isn't a bar graph, when it is actual.
Would you tell the court what the total expenses of Society Hill Towers were in 1975?
They were $60,000.
And in 1984?
They were $180,000.
Mr. Hook, why was there such a change?
The change is due to inflation. Since conversion, everything, since 1975, everything has risen in price by a tremendous amount. Food's risen, gasoline's risen. I can't think of anything that's decreased. I bought a car in 1974 for $4,000, and I bought one last year. That was 3 times as much too. That was $12,000.
Thank you. Is the market value of condominiums affected by the change to adults only, Mr. Hook?
Yes, the property values increase upon the conversion.
Mr. Hook, have you done any follow-up studies to your property value projections that you perform for D&G contractors?
No, I haven't.
How can you be sure of its accuracy then?
Well, I work with Society Hill Towers. I'm associated with them. And personally, I have sold many condominiums for them since the conversion. And the average sale price was $75,000, which is even more than I had projected it to be back in 1975.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time I ask that Defense Exhibits 2 and 3 for identification be moved into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. I have one final question, Mr. Hook. Could you please sum up your findings for the court when considering an adults-only complex?
I think an adults-only community is financially viable. For about 90% of the instances, the management expenses, which are maintenance, insurance, and repairs, invariably decrease upon a conversion to adults-only, and the property values invariably increase upon such a conversion.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Mr. Hook, on the exhibit marked D3, isn't it true that you did that report 10 years ago? D3, the one with us. It's called Society Hill Towers Condominium Units Projected Property Values. That study was done 10 years ago, am I correct?
Yes, I've done follow-ups with experience.
As you stated earlier, isn't it true that you first became interested in the adults-only concept when you were in school?
Yes, at Temple
But
University.
isn't it true that you first became genuinely interested in the adults-only concept because you were making a profit by selling apartments converted into condominiums?
Even if it wasn't adults-only, I'd still make a profit.
But isn't it true that you have personally handled the sale of 12 individual units of Society Hill Towers?
Yes, they're one of the communities.
Mr. Rock, we've seen the report you mentioned, and isn't it true that according to your own study, which is D2, the pie graph, according to your own study, some expenses have gone up, haven't they?
I've explained that already, yes.
Maintenance expenses have gone up, have they not?
I already said that, yes.
And administrative costs have?
I already explained that, yes.
And so have the recreational staff expenses.
I also already explained that too, yes.
Mr. Hook, the study that we've been talking about, you prepared that specifically for a company known as D&G Developers, didn't you?
Yes, I work for D&G.
And D&G is the company responsible for converting Society Hills into condominiums?
That is correct.
Mr. Hook, D&G hired you to do the study, did they not?
Yes, they did.
And the Homeowners Association paid you to do this report?
They're for D&G. It was D&G who paid me, but they paid me through the Homeowners Association.
In fact, the Homeowners Association keeps you on a retainer, I believe, $7,500 a year, does it not?
They're one of the communities who does, yes. D&G
Mr.
actually
Hook,
does.
now isn't it true that the projections you did for Society Hill, the D&G developers, are not exact?
That's because they're decreasing
But are
what
they
they are.
exact, Mr. Hook?
No, they're lower than the actual
Therefore, you
price.
haven't done any further comprehensive study to prove whether or not your projections were exact.
I just explained that I
But
did.
Mr. Hook, have you done any comprehensive studies, as in reports?
Not
No.
substantial, no, but I've explained that I do know the
Mr. Hook, according
cost.
to your statement in your affidavit, isn't it true that in 1984, the average sale price of a condominium was $75,000?
Yes,
Now, that $75,000 represents just an average sale price and nothing else, does it not?
of course not.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Testimony is now closed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Plaintiff should give their closing argument first, Your Honor. Excuse me? Then Mr. Proceed. Thank you, Your Honor. First, we'd like to thank you, Your Honor, and you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, for your patience and attention in listening to the evidence presented by both sides this evening. There's only one real issue to be considered in this case: whether or not the exclusion of minors from an adults-only community constitutes arbitrary discrimination. We agree with the Josephs when they say that arbitrary discrimination is wrong. Arbitrary discrimination is instituted with no rhyme or reason and is useless to the public. But discrimination, however, when backed by valid reasons, should be allowed. A minimum drinking age is discriminatory to people under the age of 21. However, this discrimination is not arbitrary because it is reasonably related to safety. Section 1604 of the Philadelphia Civil Rights Code prohibits all forms of arbitrary discrimination by business establishments. In Farnback versus Henderson, 1976, a three-pronged test was articulated to show if discrimination is arbitrary or not. The first prong says that discrimination is not arbitrary if it is reasonably related to protecting health, safety, economic, or general welfare. Heyman versus Arthur Murray, 1980, concluded that it does not require an entrepreneur to tolerate customers who damage property, injure others, or who otherwise disrupt his or her business. Mr. Price, a lifetime resident of Society Hill Towers, stated that according to his experience, crime has decreased drastically coinciding with the institution of the adults-only provision. Mr. Price cited various incidences of arson, vandalism, and all-night parties with drugs and alcohol that before the conversion were commonplace but are now non-existent. Mr. Price also told us that presently Society Hill Towers does not have the facilities to accommodate young people safely and effectively. Society Hill Towers has an unsupervised weight room and an unenclosed, unsupervised swimming pool. Hall versus Weisberg, 1963, concluded that the owner of a large complex may be held liable for negligence in the drowning death of a small child who wandered into just such an unenclosed, unsupervised swimming pool. As for economic welfare, Mr. Hook told us that management expenses invariably decrease when a complex converts to adults only. He also told us that property values in Society Hill Towers have doubled since the conversion. These, coupled with the fact that Society Hill Towers has managed to lower their insurance costs at a time when such costs are skyrocketing, shows the economic benefits of the adults-only provision. The second prong of the Farnback test states that discrimination is not arbitrary, it does not cause unreasonable hardship. Although the Josephs have been faced with some degree of hardship, this hardship is by no means unreasonable. Society Hill Towers sympathizes with the Josephs, and because of this, they were given an extra 3 months to resolve their situation. This was given in addition to the 10-month visit that Edward has been presently involved with at Society Hill Towers. Plaintiff would have the court believe that no one complained because Edward was not a burden. We contend that no complaints were raised by the tenants out of sympathy because they knew Frank's situation, they knew the Josephs, and were being supported. Dr. Kennedy, an acquaintance of the plaintiff, stated that based on a report that is 6 years old, Francis will have a terrible time finding an apartment. However, testimony from Mr. Hook indicated that at any given time, 175 vacant single-bedroom apartments are available with no child restrictions. And what's to stop the Josephs from selling their condominium? Mr. Hook stated that presently the average sale price for a condominium at Society Hill Towers would be $75,000. $75,000 would buy a very nice home that would be quite big enough and suitable for the Josephs' needs. The last prong of the Farnback test states that discrimination is not arbitrary if it does not cause unreasonable harm to the public interest. The residents of Society Hill Towers are not suffering from the adults-only restriction. They all, including the Josephs, created a contract by signing their deed, fully aware of the ramifications of the provision. Since the conversion, property values have doubled, and the residents are safer, as is evidenced by the fact that there have been no reports of unruly juveniles since Mr. Price became president. Before this court makes its final decision, we feel that there are 3 more factors that need to be weighed. First, more is at stake here than just money. The lifestyle of all the tenants at Society Hill Towers is at stake. Many of the residents at Society Hill Towers are retired people who enjoy their quiet and the extra facilities that can only be offered by an adults-only complex. The decision for the plaintiff today would not only affect the Josephs, but the other 479 families residing in Society Hill Towers presently. And it wouldn't stop there. The decision for the plaintiff today would jeopardize adults-only complexes throughout the state of Pennsylvania and would threaten the adults-only idea as a whole. Justice is not served when the needs of the one are placed over the needs of the many. Lastly, why? Why are the Josephs now challenging the adults-only restriction? With their own full consent, they signed a binding contract and have been living under this contract and enjoying its benefits for over 9 years. Now, they are seeking to destroy the very provision that has helped them and kept them safe for nearly a decade. We believe that the evidence presented today clearly demonstrates and supports the validity of the adults-only provision. Therefore, we respectfully ask the court to rule in favor of the Society Hill Towers Homeowners Association and grant our counterclaim for possession of Unit 3A, Building 4529. Thank you.
Your Honor, the defense rests at this time.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for coming here this evening and listening patiently and carefully to both sides before organizing your own theory of this case. The Josephs had never intended to buy real estate. They were forced into buying their condominium because they did not have the finances to move. They were assured that the adults-only provision did not apply to their family. We maintain that this adults-only provision was explained in a manner that strongly suggests misrepresentation of facts. Mrs. Joseph has explained to the court that Francis and Edward are staying with them only for a visit. A visit is defined by Webster's dictionary as to dwell with temporarily as a guest, which is exactly what Francis and Edward are doing. The testimony of Dr. Kennedy has proven that overall costs of the complex would go down if children were allowed back in. In fact, costs rose when the discriminatory clause was put into effect. Dr. Kennedy has denied any relationship with the Josephs that isn't purely professional. But what about Jonathan Cook? He is paid a yearly retainer of $7,500, and he is employed by the association. Therefore, his testimony is biased, and unfortunately, his motive is greed. The testimony of Juan Price also appears somewhat questionable. The entire foundation of this case, the reason we are here tonight, is based upon an invalid vote by his own association. Pennsylvania law and association law require a majority vote to enforce any action against a homeowner. If there are 20 representatives, 20 votes, a majority is clearly 11. The ruling against the Josephs was by 9, falling 2 votes short of that required majority of 11. We are asking the court to declare the adults-only provision a form of arbitrary discrimination and therefore null and void. Many charts and costs and figures have been brought to your attention this evening. Charts and costs are not the real issue. The real issue is the legality of arbitrary discrimination against all those under the age of 21, namely Edward Pesco. The Joseph family has lived at Society Hill Towers for 26 years. They were told that the adults-only provision did not apply to them. When their apartment was converted into a condominium, they had no other choice than to scrape together a down payment. Now, they are being asked to move without any compensation at all for all the money they have spent on their home. The burden of proof has now fallen to myself and to my co-counsel to convince you that the Homeowners Association supports arbitrary discrimination. In 1976, the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas established a three-pronged test to prove when discrimination is in fact arbitrary. First of all, discrimination is arbitrary if it is not reasonably related to health, safety, economic, or general welfare. The association has decided to judge not on an individual basis, but to discriminate against an entire age group. The actions of the few have unfortunately determined the future of the many. Next, discrimination is arbitrary if it causes unreasonable hardship for the person affected by the act of discrimination. If 18-month-old Edward and his widowed, unemployed mother were pushed into the streets, definite hardship would be experienced. Lastly, the distinction is arbitrary because it causes unreasonable harm to the public interest. Age discrimination will unfortunately affect all of our public. Please keep in mind that only one prong of this test must be proven to constitute arbitrary discrimination, while all three prongs must be defended, or else this type of discrimination is definitely arbitrary. The defendant has tried to convince you that the type of discrimination against the Josephs is legal. We maintain that discrimination by race, color, or age without outstanding reason is arbitrary and never legal. Again, we are asking the court to declare the adults-only provision a form of arbitrary discrimination, and therefore null and void. The real issue of this case is the legality of arbitrary discrimination. In 1863, the United States court system began to fight the battle of prejudice. The emancipation of the slaves led the way towards the abolishment of racial prejudice. The path was thus paved towards freedom and equality for women. This freedom and equality has made it possible for myself and my co-counsel to be here this evening. We must look to our past before looking towards our future. Today, we are faced everywhere with the discrimination of both young and old. Never before has a nation like ours so responsibly shouldered the burden of human aspirations of equality. Never before has a nation like ours put that equality within our grasp. Age is not a reasonable basis for discrimination. Do not let the actions of the few speak for the future of the many. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you.
Have a recess for 3 minutes.
Court is in recess.
Oh, man, I can't go get it. Let's send it to the rear.
We're going to have a brief critique by Judge McIntyre while the scorekeepers are out deliberating in the interest of time since we ran a little bit late starting. Mrs. McIntyre?
First, to announce the decision of the court after hearing all the testimony and the direction of counsel. I find in favor of the defendant on the basis that the claim actually not meet its burden in establishing arbitrary discrimination in this case. And that's the case. However, I'm going to suggest and direct that the association grant an additional 90 days to the Josephs to remedy this situation. And since I understand that the defendant's witness, the realtor, indicated his willingness to help him find appropriate housing, and if there is housing available, the Director Association is requesting support to assist the Josephs in finding adequate housing, whether it be for the whole family or for just the daughters and grandsons. That's the decision of the court. I'd like to call it a while. This is not a tremendously easy legal question because there certainly are equities on both sides of the fence. I don't want to see a kid thrown out in the street any more than anybody else. It's difficult. The suggestions or comments that I make are only in an effort and if there are ones perhaps assist you. They are my suggestions. That means that you think you have to call, take up the one you want to as you go. Okay. I thought in the plaintiff showed me that you don't see discrimination before you establish what the case was about. You started talking about arbitrary discrimination before you told the jury what the facts were that you believe established that arbitrary discrimination. So perhaps you may want to talk a little bit more about this family coming home and needing a place to live and stuff. Maybe you want to set the facts and what's going to happen when you throw that. Talk about the facts and then say this is arbitrary discrimination, we'll show it like such and such. It was not clear to me in your opening who was being, where the discrimination was. Whether the discrimination was against his 18-month-old child, or whether the discrimination was against the entire Joseph family. I think it needs to be clear to establish who is suffering from this alleged discrimination. I thought your opening, however, was very well organized and clear. You might want to slow down. You always get it in there and get it over with in 5 minutes at the farm, and that might want to slow down better. Because I think sometimes we are all inclined to talk very fast, and when we talk fast, our voices go, hey, I would suggest that you not stand in council table when you were opening the post, that you do approach. Now, perhaps you've been told otherwise, and fine, I'm only making my suggestion. But if the table becomes a crutch, you have distanced yourself from the people that you want to influence. You want to influence these viewers. It is your argument, your case to present. You want to influence 12 people. And the farther away you are, the more difficult it is for you to establish a forum for that group of 12. I would make that suggestion. I think you also want to be careful for something that I picked up, and I'm sure all 3 of you want to state the question in a different way. That's natural. Try to keep from when one person is asking, members is asking a question, start prompting him or giving him some words or telling him not to say it. You jumped right in the opening and said that the facts have been very well covered by the plaintiff. And that's sure you listened to what the plaintiff said. Because I think you were prepared to say the facts are very well covered. But if you want to look at, listen to that evidence and decide whether there aren't some other facts that you want to present in the light of the defense that is going to the testimony that you're going to say. I think it's easy to have your opening ready and ready to go, but you think you might want to listen a little bit and see what point perhaps they did down that you might want to add. When you introduced, you mentioned to the jury and to the court in Maryland who the witnesses are going to be. The witnesses should not stand up and say that. You are not introducing them to the jury. You are telling the jury who they are. You do not want to use them to stand up. Then you answer to the witnesses and ask Joseph. I think that the witness, obviously, President Joseph wants to come across as a rather pathetic, difficult person. He's going to have great sympathy with you. You're a fighter. But I think that it's not kind of encouraging to feel that you really want to be a good point like this. So just want to try to be a little bit more reasonable and you're crying as you should. I saw counsel, counsel give you a nod and then the tears came. I think I have a real problem with the argument that the defendant gets that families use That's not logical with what you're trying to prove. When you're trying to prove that It's discrimination not to allow this person to live there because he's under 21, and so you guys live it by saying, well, who's only visiting in the first place? And perhaps my response to that would be, well, fine, why didn't you go to the management and tell them that until my daughter and grandson are able to find a job, they'll be visiting here and we work something else. This is all basically I think it's a lot to decide they're just visitors, but we think it's wrong because you won't let them live here. You're going to see it for them. So perhaps you might want to look at that. On cross-examination of Jack Joseph, I think he relied on the notes too much. And I think that when she responded as vigorously as she responded to you, I think I would review my notes and make sure I speak down a little better and a little clearer. Beautiful leading question about the candidate. I love it. Anybody pick up the leading question about the candidate? Dr. Kennedy, what was it?
What's the name of the book?
What was the name of the book?
The Day Used to Direct. Yeah.
Leading question. The thing was, here, I have to say, one of the weaknesses I see perhaps in the case is that the expert witness talks about the increase in cost between 1975 and with the bar chart and all that. And yeah, that's what it says. I think you have inflation. But I don't think the bar chart, unless you have some other testimony, I don't think it just helps you as the claim establishes the cost of the lot more than the development. Because the issue is inflation and the better estimate of what the costs are present on the studies. And so I think in that sense, that is not really the strongest. Both are, in all the cross-examinations of the witness issue, particularly the expert witness issue, we certainly did try to establish that they are biased. Dr. Kennedy by being, close to his friend, Dr. Mr. Hope, whatever, being paid to do this. Let me ask you a question. I'm jumping right ahead and you won't stop. Okay. Quick question. Why is Mr. Hope testifying on greed? I'm curious. Why is he testifying on greed?
Oh, greed?
Because he's paid by the defendant.
What if he wins the case if they win the case not Dr. Hope's
Well, he offers to waive his commission.
Look how much money Dr. Hope's going to make himself on the place. Mr. Hope, that's news. And all the people start moving, and Mr. Hope is there he has all this grace. See, I'm not so sure he is, he's not getting anything from testifying, then what he's trying to do is their reason. And he will continue with the witness law. I'm just saying, my whole look at that.
Well, it sounded okay. Sounded good.
One thing that we all try to do is be so polite. I mean, like, Your Honor, please, sir, please, a lot of times, be careful you don't, when you're cross-examining a witness, don't thank that witness who just said something untrue. There was one statement where one of the witnesses was asked, one cross-examination came back, that did not come out favorably to the plaintiff, and the plaintiff's counsel said, thank you very much. You don't want to thank the witness for him. You can ask if you want. I don't know, just so there's anything else, but I don't feel it was very good comparing the Kennedy analysis of the cost. That was very well done. One Price was an excellent witness. And the question was very good. The closings, I same, so probably something was all working on for how many months. They were excellent. They were very clear, they were very well organized, and I thought both of the persons were just outstanding, and you really should be very good. So I have no other comments today. I will answer any questions. I thank you. Very perform magnificently, and I will all as you
Way back. They're going to way back. Kids are good.
Can I have all the team members up here for just a real quick meeting? I want to go over a couple of things with you. The trial is being videotaped, and these small microphones are hooked up to our video camera. And all rise. The Court of Common Pleas of Philadelphia County is now in session. The Honorable Marion McIntyre presiding. This is the case of Arnold Joseph versus Society Hill Towers Homeowners Association.
Yes, Your Honor. Okay, is that up, Mr. Jury? Thank you, Your Honor.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury, and opposing counsel. May it please the court to introduce myself. My name is Carl Cullen, and these are my colleagues, Gladys Dayu and Louis Chen. We represent the plaintiff, Annette Joseph. We are here to prove that our client, Mrs. Joseph, was illegally discriminated against by the Society Hill Towers Homeowners Association. We know that in 1977, the Society Hill Towers converted from an apartment dwelling to an adults-only condominium. In June of 1982, the plaintiff's daughter, Frances Joseph Pesco, moved away with her husband, Andy. After her husband's tragic death, Ms. Pesco and her son, Edward, moved back into the complex. We also know that on October 15, 1985, 10 months after their return, a period of time where 3 building representative meetings were held, the Society Hill Towers Homeowners Association, with 4 absentees, voted to enforce the adults-only provision against the plaintiff, Mrs. Joseph, purely a case of arbitrary discrimination. The plaintiff will show that this is arbitrary discrimination because the provision is not related to protecting the health, safety, economic, or general welfare. As witnesses Darlene Kennedy and Annette Joseph will show that costs and crime have increased as the towers changed in 1977. Mrs. Joseph will show that this is arbitrary discrimination because it causes harm to the public interest. It does not allow families to permit their children to have the right to live in the environment of their choice. Last but not least, we will show that the distinction is arbitrary discrimination since it causes an unreasonable hardship for the tenants affected by the provision. Your Honor, if you find in favor of the defendant, Annette Joseph's daughter, Frances, and her grandson, Edward, will have to go in search of housing elsewhere in a market where apartments that allow children is scarce. Based on our evidence, we are sure that you will find in favor of our client, Annette Joseph. Thank you.
May it please the court. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Robin Martin, and my colleagues are Miss Ann Hudock and Mr. William Hoover. Together we represent Society Hill Towers Homeowners Association, a licensed business in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We will call the following witnesses to the stand. First, we will call Ms. Juanita Price, who is president of the Homeowners Association. Secondly, we will call Ms. Janet Holt, who is the budget and sales operator for Society Hill Towers and chief executive and owner of Holt Realtors. The principal issue in this case is whether or not Society Hill Towers has had the right to adopt and enforce an adult-only provision within their bylaws and subsequent deeds provided to each individual homeowner. We will call Juanita Price, the president of the Homeowners Association since 1980. D&G Developers, who converted Society Hill Towers to condominiums in 1977, does in fact include a copy of the adult-only clause in each individual deed. This clause states that no children shall be permitted to reside in Society Hill Towers as of January 1st, 1977. And as a concession to present homeowners, any child presently living in Society Hill Towers may continue to do so. D&G Developers made this change to adults only to, number one, make a child-free environment for those who wished it. Number two, to increase the property value. Number three, to create facilities for adults only. And as a result of Pennsylvania law, if a child was injured at these adults-only facilities, all homeowners would be responsible for any injury and raising money for liabilities for that injury. Ms. Price will also state that in regards to the adults-only provision, that the Josephs did sign and therefore agreed to the adults-only provision. Through Ms. Price, we will learn that the representatives, officers, and homeowners are responsible for enforcing the rules of the association. Also, that prior to the purchase of the condominium, each potential homeowner is made aware of the following rights, restrictions, and responsibilities. Number one, each owner must join the association. Number two, each owner must agree to abide by all Society Hill Towers rules and regulations. Number three, each owner must pay association dues. Number four, each member may take part in the selection of the building representative from which in the building they reside. And number five, each owner has a vote in the changing of rules and ownership for Society Hill Towers. Ms. Joseph did in fact meet all these requirements. Ms. Price will state that there was a meeting of the building representatives on October 15th, and that there was a complaint brought to the attention of the homeowners. That complaint was that the Josephs were in violation of their deed, the adults-only clause. There was no action taken in the previous past months when the homeowners decided to allow a grace period. They felt that the representatives felt that the 10 months allowed was enough time for the Tescos to get back on their feet. Therefore, they served them with a notice stating they must remedy the situation within 90 days or move out. In further contact to Lauren Miller, she then received a notice stating, "Give me a break." Through our second witness, Ms. Cook, we will establish that in her expert opinion, the adults-only complex has many benefits. And from her two dozen studies that she has made on adults-only complexes, these benefits include, number one, an increase in sales price of units. Number two, a decrease in management costs. Number three, a decrease in operating and repairs costs. And number four, a decline in insurance for Society Hill Towers. Ms. Hope will show through her studies between 1975 and 1984 that changes in spending of homeowners' money is in fact a benefit that the homeowners want, for they have bought these condominiums for their high property value and their child-free environment in which they create. Therefore, the fact that less money is spent on insurance and more is spent on recreation for the adults-only facilities is a benefit that they all want. Ms. Hope will further state that she is willing to help the Pescos with her professional services at no cost to find them a place to reside in. The adults-only clause satisfies the three-pronged test, so therefore it is not arbitrary discrimination. For number one, it does not hurt the health, safety, economic, or general welfare of the Pescos or Josephs in any unreasonable way. Number two, it does not cause unreasonable hardship to either party either. Number three, it does not cause unreasonable harm to the public. It is evident that there is help available for the Pescos in more than one way. The Josephs should be not permitted to continue residing in Society Hill Towers if they choose to live with their daughter and grandson. The Josephs, as members of the Homeowners Association, did agree on the adults-only provisions by signing their deed. And Edward, in concession to this, did not reside in Society Hill Towers as of January 1st, 1977, the stated date for the adults-only provision. And Frances, in regard to the concession, did not live in a continuing residency, for she moved away when she was married. Therefore, they are both in violation of the deed. We agree that the circumstances are regrettable, for there has been a death, but it is evident that there is help for the tragic loss of Miss Pesco and her son. Thank you.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Mrs. Annette Justice for witness.
Raise your right hand. For the purpose of this action, you may consider yourself sworn, and if you are sworn to tell the truth, you may proceed.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Just so she can hear me as I question her. Good evening.
Good evening.
Would you state your full name for the court, please?
Mrs. Annette Joseph,
And where do you live, Mrs. Joseph?
building 4519 3A.
Is that in Society Hill Towers?
Yes, it is.
Whom do you live with right now?
My husband, my daughter Frances, and my grandson Edward.
And how long have you lived with all of them?
Fran and Edward have been back with us for 10 months now. I'm sorry.
Could you explain why you brought suit against Society Hill Towers?
Yes. We received notice saying that we were in violation of our deed, and we don't feel we are because we were told that it didn't apply to people like us.
Tell me, Mrs. Joseph, what was your relationship with Juanita Price?
She was friends with Frances when they were growing up, so I knew her when she was a child. She was a friend of ours, but I really don't think she is any longer.
Are there any hostile feelings between you and Miss Price?
No.
Your Honor, I object on the grounds that this is irrelevant.
I just wanted to prove that my client did not take action against Society Hill Towers out of spite or as a grudge.
Your Honor, by establishing the relationship between Mrs. Joseph and Miss Price, it does seem that she is trying to show that there is bias.
I'm going to explain it.
Thank you. Tell me, Mrs. Joseph, when did Society Hill Towers change to a condominium residence?
1977.
When it changed, did you sign a deed?
Yes, I did.
And what did this deed say?
It stated that no one under 21 years of age may reside in Society Hill Towers unless they had been living there prior to January 1st, 1977, which we were.
Why did you sign this deed?
We were told it didn't apply to people like us.
Mrs. Joseph, could you tell the court why your daughter Frances returned to Society Hill Towers?
Yes. On New Year's Eve of 1983, her husband was coming home and he was hit head-on by a drunk driver and he was killed.
Your Honor, I object. This is also irrelevant. The drunk driver has nothing to do with this.
She was just explaining what happened.
Well, I know that, and I know that you wanted to say that, but what's the relevance of it? What is the relevance of it to this lawsuit as to how it has been?
Well, I honestly cannot think of any more words, Your Honor.
I'm going to sustain the objection, but also indicate that the answer has already been given, so the answer is already on the record. So sustain the objection in that sense.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could your daughter just stay where she was?
How could she? She's a high school dropout. She doesn't have any money and she can't get a job and she has a son.
Have you discussed Fran and Edward's living with your neighbors?
Yes, I have.
Did all of those whom you spoke with say that the situation was all right?
All but one.
And who was that one?
Lauren Miller.
Who's Lauren Miller?
She's our building representative.
Mrs. Joseph, have you noticed any changes in crime since the change to condominiums?
No, I personally feel that if it hasn't remained the same, it's gotten worse. My car was stolen, and I know of other people's whose car were also stolen.
Now, earlier in your testimony, you said that Fran and Edward had been living with you for 10 months. Were you contacted by the representatives during this time about this matter?
No, it wasn't after the 10-month period.
It was not in that 10-month period?
No.
Would you care for Fran and Edward to live with you?
What mother wouldn't want her own flesh and blood to remain living with her? Yes, I want them there.
And would you care to move if the situation occurred?
It's my home. I want to stay in my home.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mrs. Joseph, isn't it true that when you signed your deed, you were aware of the adults-only provision?
We were told it didn't apply to us, but yes, we were aware of it.
And isn't it also true that by signing your deed, you agreed to the adults-only provision?
We were told it didn't apply to us
And you did sign the deed, correct?
because we were sure that it didn't apply to us.
Were you advised that this deed did not bar the continuing residence of your daughter Frances?
Yes.
And did Frances ever move out since January 1st of 1977?
Yes, she did.
And why did Frances move out?
Because she got married.
Did she do this of her own free will, Mrs. Joseph?
Objection, Your Honor. The question is irrelevant to the case.
Your Honor, we feel it's very relevant. We're trying to show that Frances moved out of her own free will, and in doing so, she surrendered her right to residency in Society Hill. She surrendered her right to protection under the clause which guaranteed her continual residency. She was not living there continuously since January 1 of 77. It's a very important point to our case, Your Honor.
We feel, however, that the marriage of the daughter has no relevancy to
The question was whether she moved out voluntarily, or whether she got beyond that. Although we will be objecting. Did Frances move out of her own free will, Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
And isn't it true that she moved... Oh, excuse me. So her residence was not a continual one, is that correct? And therefore, it was not protected under the guidelines in the deed, correct?
Yes.
When Frances moved back to Philadelphia, Mrs. Joseph, you admitted her, didn't you? You readmitted her to your residency?
Of course, I'm her mother.
And you did this of your own free will also, correct?
Yes, I did it out of love for my daughter.
Did you admit Edward Pesco?
Yes, what was I supposed to do? Let him remain on his own?
How old is Edward, Mrs. Joseph?
A year and a half.
Does not the provision in the deed exempt those persons and those persons alone who were living in Society Hill Towers as of January 1, 1977?
Yes, it does.
And isn't it not true that Edward was not living there? In fact, Edward was not even alive as of January 1, 1977.
That is correct.
When it appeared that Frances and Edward would be living with you for some time, isn't it correct that you checked with your neighbors to see if they'd be all right?
Objection, Your Honor. The question has already been asked and answered in direct examination.
I'm quite aware of that. I'm trying to re-emphasize the point which you're about to make. When it appeared that Frances and Edward would be living with you for some time, Mrs. Joseph, you readmitted them, didn't you? I mean, you checked with the other persons in your building, correct?
Yes.
And were there any objections?
One.
That would be Lauren Miller, correct?
Excuse me, Your Honor. Can our witness have a few minutes to compose herself, please?
Your Honor, if the witness is recomposed, I'd like to continue this taking up the time for cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mrs. Joseph, how many buildings are there in Society Hill Towers?
I don't know offhand.
Is it true there are 20 buildings in Society Hill Towers?
Yes.
And so you neglected to check with the residents of the other 19 buildings, correct, Mrs. Joseph?
Yes?
Objection, Your Honor, the question is beyond the scope of direct examination.
Would you repeat the question, please? You neglected to check with the residents of the other 19. It is within the scope because plaintiff showed that Mrs. Joseph checked with the residents in her building. We're trying to establish here that Mrs. Joseph ignored a basic, she was trying to change the rules of the complex by allowing her... you testify. Sorry. Give us your response as to why it's within the scope. It's within the scope because they brought up the fact that she checked with persons in her own building, and therefore we're trying to establish the fact that in ignoring the other residents, it's very important. That's why we need to bring it up. What's important than that is not the issue. It was within the scope because, Your Honor, the plaintiff has already brought up the fact that Mrs. Joseph has checked with the other residents. What we're doing the objective to without the question. You neglected the other 19, correct?
Yes.
And you neglected to check with the other 456 residents of Society Hill Towers, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware, Mrs. Joseph, that in order to effect a change in the general rules of residency among the homeowners, this change must be approved unanimously by the homeowners?
Yes.
And you did not receive unanimous approval at Society Hill Towers, did you not, Mrs. Joseph?
Excuse me?
You didn't receive that unanimous approval, did you?
No, I didn't.
In fact, you didn't even receive unanimous approval in your own building, did you?
No.
Have you made any attempts to find Francis and Edward at home?
Yes, we have.
Did this include checking with the classified section of your newspaper?
We've tried every source.
Even realtors, Mrs. Joseph?
Fran can't afford a realtor.
You did not check with the realtor.
Objection, Your Honor, this question is again beyond the scope of direct examination.
Since the plan showed in direct examination that Mrs. Joseph did attempt to find housing, we feel it's indeed within the scope to ask her what sources she checked with. You didn't check with the realtor, correct?
Excuse me?
You did not check with the realtor, correct, Mrs. Joseph?
Correct.
In your attempts to find housing, did you find any who would be willing to admit children at all?
Certainly there are ones that will admit children, but none that Fran can afford.
Did you receive a notice, Mrs. Joseph, from the Homeowners Association on October 20th?
Yes.
And was this note in reference to the October 15th meeting, Mrs. Joseph?
Yes, it was.
And was the content of this note such asking you to amend the situation you're in violation of?
Yes.
Did you send a note to Lauren Miller on October 22nd, Mrs. Joseph?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, the question is again beyond the scope of direct examination.
Mrs. Joseph, the plaintiff brought up the fact that she had received the note and that she was definitely aware of the action brought against her. She would not have brought this lawsuit to court. Therefore, it's within the scope.
However, the question of a response to the note was never brought out in direct examination.
We feel that since the issue of the note was brought out, so whether the response or not was the content of this note such asking you to amend the situation you were in violation of, Mrs. Joseph?
The note that I received?
Yes, Mrs. Joseph.
Yes.
After sending a note to the Homeowners Association on October 22nd, has there been any formal correspondence between yourself and the association?
No, not really.
Getting back to the note you sent just for one moment here. Wasn't the exact and the complete wording of that note to give me a break?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor, we would like to call Mrs. Starling Evans' charges. Good evening, Ms. Kennedy. How are you this evening?
Fine.
Will you please state your full name officially for the record?
Yeah, Miss Darlene Kennedy.
Ms. Kennedy, can you give us some information on your educational background?
Yes, I received my BA in Sociology and Economics at, Dickinson College, and I also received my master's degree and my PhD at Temple University and my MBA at Wharton School of Business.
Are you presently employed?
Yes, I am.
And what is your profession?
I'm an economic professor at Penn State University.
What is your primary field of study?
Economics and with a concentration in house and market and contemporary trend, in housing sales and rentals.
How long have you been employed?
For the past 24 years, sir?
Have you ever written any books relevant to your field of study?
Yes. In 1983, I wrote a book titled Age Discrimination in Housing, Subverting Our Traditional Values.
And what studies have you conducted?
Well, in 1980, I conducted a study in housing vacancy rate in the U.S. In 1984, I conducted another study in housing discrimination in the Philadelphia area.
Your Honor, based on the experience, education, and knowledgeability of this witness, we would like to submit her to the court as an expert in the field of housing with a concentration in housing markets and contemporary trends in that market.
No objections, Your Honor.
Witness will be permitted to testify as an expert in record.
In the 1980 study of vacancy rates that you mentioned, Ms. Kennedy, what were your findings?
Well, in the vacancy rate, I found that 1% is actually, that the vacancy rate is actually 1% lower in the Philadelphia area, and that 76% of all anti-child restriction, that 76% of housing has some form of anti-child restriction laws.
Based on your studies, knowledgeability, and experience in the housing field, do you have a professional opinion regarding the availability of housing for an unemployed widow with an 18-month-old child?
I feel a woman of such position will have little or no chance of finding any adequate housing.
What is the basis for that opinion?
Well, since she is unemployed, she's a widow, and she has no credentials as a possible tenant, plus she has a son. And as I mentioned earlier, 76% of all housing has some form of anti-child restriction, and her unemployed parent status would make it almost impossible for her to find any type of housing.
I see. Ms. Kennedy, are you familiar with the impact of anti-child restrictions on property values or maintenance costs?
In all my years, I have never seen any evidence showing anti-restriction showing that property values will increase or that the maintenance costs will decrease.
I see. Your Honor, we request that this document be marked Plaintiff's Exhibit 1 for identification.
We have a copy. Thank you anyway.
That's some water.
Ms. Kennedy, can you identify this document to the court?
Yes, it's a study that I prepared. What it is, it shows that Society Hill's operating expense in 1975 as to 1984.
Can you explain the document?
Yeah, what it shows is that administration in the year 1975 was $6,600, and that in 1984 it has gone up to $46,800, which was a 700% increase. And maintenance in 1975 was $13,800, and it also has gone up in the year 1984 to $46,800. And assurance was $23,400 in the year 1975, and it also has gone up to $43,200 in 1984. And recreation was $2,400. In 1984, it has gone up to $21,600, which was a 1,000% increase. And in 1975 again, in repairs, it was $13,200. In 1984, it was $19,800. And miscellaneous expense was $600 in 1975. And in 1984, it was $1,800.
Ms. Kennedy, based upon that document, what has been the overall effect on the cost of living at Society Hill Towers?
That the cost has increased a triple amount.
The cost has increased how much?
300%, which has tripled it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor. Ms.
Kennedy, isn't it true that Andy Pesco's mother called you personally and asked you to look out for her daughter-in-law and her
Objection, Your
grandson?
Honor. The question is beyond the scope of direct examination.
Your Honor, we'd like to show that Ms. Kennedy here would have bias toward as the defendant, would have bias toward us. So isn't it true that Andy Pesco's mother called you personally and asked you to look out for her daughter-in-law and grandson?
Yes, he did. Yes,
Is
he
it
did.
not also
Go ahead.
Is it not also true that you offered to assist Mrs. Pesco in any way you could?
Yes, I said I would help her, but I will not perjure myself in court.
But it is true that you offered to assist her in any way.
Yes, but as I said, I won't perjure myself.
Isn't it true that Andy Pesco was a student of yours at Penn State University?
Yes, he was.
So you consider yourself personally involved or acquainted with the Pescos, do you not?
Well, I just known him as a student. That was like 7 years ago,
So that is personally involved, do you not?
if you want to call it that.
Did you know that the deeds of Society Hill Towers had an adult-only provision excluded in them? And did you know that the homeowners must agree to all provisions of Society Hill Towers for their purpose? Did you know that the Josephs agreed to the adult-only provision previously?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to refer to the plaintiff's exhibit.
Yeah, I have one.
Are you aware that Society Hill Towers has expanded its facilities since your percentage studies that you did approximately 1 year ago?
Your Honor, we object. Witness is being non-responsive. We would ask the witness to please acknowledge verbally her response, please.
The record is the court started when he was sitting down there, we don't do it, was unable to split up the law.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Kennedy, are you aware that Society Hill Towers has expanded its facilities since your percentage studies done approximately 1 year ago?
Objection, Your Honor. The question is beyond the scope of direct examination.
Your Honor, this witness is an expert in the field of economics and has studied the adults-only provision and has done economic studies for the adults-only and Society Hill Towers.
However, she has not been personally involved with the finances of Society Hill Towers, other than those studies you mentioned.
The studies included the adults-only provision, therefore she would know that there has been facilities added to it.
However, the expansion is not covered on the document that she
Look at your chart, Dr. Kennedy. I see that there are no allowances for inflation. Is that correct?
Yes, but inflation is included along with it.
Ms. Kennedy, does it state that on your chart that inflation is included?
But as I said, it is included, but yes, it is.
So these costs were prepared over a period of 9 years. Is that not correct?
Yes.
So isn't it true that as Society Hill Towers would increase its facilities and its physical plant, that administration would naturally go up, and maintenance would go up, insurance would go up, recreational staff would go up, and repairs would go up? Is that not true that that would naturally happen in a normal economy?
Yes.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Did you want this?
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, we would like to call Miss Juanita Price to the stand.
You raise your right hand, state your name.
Juanita Price?
For the purposes of this matter this evening, you consider yourself sworn, and that you're sworn to tell the truth.
Please state your name and place of residency for the court.
Juanita Price, I reside at 4501 1A in Society Hill Towers.
What is your current occupation, Ms. Price?
Right now, I am president of the Homeowners Association.
How long have you held this position with the Homeowners Association?
Since 1980, when I replaced my father, the late Dr. Claude Price.
Could you please tell the court who D&G developers are?
D&G developers are the people who first constructed Society Hill Towers in 1956 when they were only apartments, and they're the people who made them into condominiums in 1977.
As of January 1st, 1977, what decision did D&G builders make in regards to Society Hill Towers?
That Society Hill Towers would be an adults-only condominium complex.
And for what reasons did D&G developers decide to convert to condominiums?
They wanted to create a child-free environment for those who wish to live in one. They wanted to create facilities for adults only, and they wanted to increase the property value.
What facilities are available now in Society Hill Towers for adults only?
Currently, there are 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools, one, which I may add, is not enclosed. There's one fitness center containing universal and free weights, and one sauna bath.
What type of supervision is available at these facilities for the adults?
Well, at the swimming pools, they're supervised from 12 to 4 o'clock on the weekends, and the fitness center is supervised from 7 to 9 o'clock in the evenings.
So in other words, Ms. Price, there are times when these facilities are not supervised?
Yes, most of the time the facilities aren't supervised.
Are there any facilities at Society Hill Towers specifically for children?
No, there are none specifically for children.
And who would be responsible should a child wander into these facilities and become injured?
The homeowners would be liable for any injuries sustained to a child.
How would the money be raised to pay